What's up guys, it's Sydney and I'm back for another Haunted Locations episode. This is going to be the third episode of the Haunted Locations series that I'm doing. So if you haven't seen the first two episodes, you can go down to the description down below. I'm actually going to link those down there so you can just click on it and see the first two episodes. Also, if you like crystals and stuff like this, I do have a shop on Etsy. It's Perfect Poison Shop, so if you want to go on there and take a look and see what I have, I'm going to be having a sale pretty soon, but until then, go take a look at my inventory and what I got in stock. So let's get into the video. So this week we're going to be talking about the Sultan's Palace, and that is actually in New Orleans in Louisiana. The Sultan's Palace is a 3.5-story mansion with a half basement built into it. It's located on 716 Daphne Street. Joseph Gardet, whatever, was a successful dentist, and he actually had the house built in 1836. He then sold it a couple of years later to Jean Laprete. I suck at pronouncing names, so Jean Laprete was a wealthy banker and plantation owner, and when he bought the house in 1839, he actually paid $20,049 for it, which in today's society, with inflation and all that, which would be about $544,000 for this mansion. So obviously Laprete was extremely wealthy. So he lived in the house for a while with his family, and he not only lived there, but he lived on one of the plantation locations that he owned as well. He went back and forth like 6 months there, 6 months at the plantation. But in 1860 is when the Civil War started to break out. Laprete actually lost his fortune as well as having to rent out his mansion. Now here's where the story gets a little weird. There's two different versions to the story. So the first one is, and we're going to go into theories and stuff afterwards, but the first one is that he rented his mansion to a very wealthy Arab sultan, and this sultan was incredibly wealthy. He brought tons of lavish furniture and goods and property property to this mansion. He actually ushered in a bunch of people as well. So he had men, women, children. He had bodyguards. He had everything that you could possibly think of as far as like property and people goes in this place. The neighbors actually would talk about the mansion all the time, and they actually named it the Sultan's Palace because no one was ever invited in or allowed to go in, and they would always hear music and like partying and like sex noises and stuff going on in this mansion that they were never allowed into. So not only would they hear the music, the sounds of ridiculous orgies going on in this house, the windows were always blocked off so you couldn't see anything, and there was always bodyguards outside of the mansion, so you couldn't get in, couldn't try to knock on the door because they would immediately stop you. So not only that, but they also had a very pungent smell of opium wafting through the neighborhood from the mansion. They also had a vast number of servants that served them, and obviously the Sultan was very rich. So not only was no one allowed in this house or invited to any of these parties or orgies that the Sultan was throwing, but there was actually packages delivered there, and instead of someone coming out to get the packages and then pay for them like you normally would, they would leave the packages at the door, and then whoever in the middle of the night or whenever, because you couldn't see them do this, would take the packages and then leave gold. They would leave a brick of gold outside of the house as payment. So it was always quite a mystery to the people of New Orleans, specifically in the French quarters that lived in this area, that they were so suspicious of him and what he was doing and why he had all these women and girls, and there was rumors that he had kidnapped a girl, so it's just kind of crazy. So here's the good part. So here's where it gets good. During the middle of the night, one night there was a big storm. So during the middle of the night, all the candles were snuffed out in the house and the shutters were closed. Everything was blocked off like it normally was. But the next morning, so here's where the story gets a little weird. So there's two different accounts, one a woman and one a man. Either way, someone walks by the house, they see the trickle of blood coming down from the front steps of the home, and they immediately got scared. And the reason why they noticed the blood in the first place is because there was actually no music or sex sounds or anything like that coming from the actual mansion. That's why that person noticed, because there was no actual sounds or anything like that coming from the mansion, and that was very, very unlikely at the time. This episode is so strange because it's not like the other episodes that I do, because none of the stories and stuff that I've found are actually factual. There's nothing written down in stone that this is what happened. And there's actual like theories and stuff for what happened. So I'm gonna get into that. So when the police arrived at the house, they were nervous to go inside it in the first place because of the mystery that came about with this mansion. So when they did eventually go in, a few of the officers actually ran out right away because they were so sickened with what they saw. But every person that was ushered into that house to begin with, women, children, boys, men, bodyguards, everybody was actually murdered during this night, and their bodies were dismembered. The way that they described it was like a butcher shop. Their organs and stuff were actually like strung up along the staircase, and they said it was one of the most gruesome crime scenes that they had ever seen in their life. And I can't even imagine going in there and just seeing organs and body parts just sprawled up like that. Like, it's crazy. So the bodies that were not fully dismembered, some of them had missing limbs, missing heads, missing feet, you know, any part of the body obviously that you could dismember, they tried to dismember. And if it was a person that did all of these murders, they sure as hell had a lot of time, and it just doesn't make sense to me, because like, why would no one in the neighborhood not hear any screams? Even if it was a storm, if your body's being dismembered, you're screaming loudly. Like, you're very loud. So the fact that no one heard anything is just the weirdest thing to me. It's just the weirdest thing. But anyway, it looked like as if all of these bodies were like ravished by animals and then somehow magically strung up the fucking staircase and walls and shit by animals. It was one of the most gruesome murders and dismemberments of all of the United States history. So like I said before, some of the officers actually ran out of the house in the initial entering the house, but a lot of them were vomiting and they were getting sick from the smells from the bodies and from the organs and things that were hung up. So the police searched the entire house and could not find any living person, but there were bodies everywhere. The floor was drenched in blood. They could barely walk on it without slipping because there was so much blood everywhere on the ground. So once they went through the entire house and found all of the dismembered bodies and organs that were hung up, they actually went into the backyard and saw a hand sticking out of the ground, pretty much like this much of the hand. And they obviously started digging him up. Now here's where it gets wonky too. Some stories say that it was the Sultan himself, and then some stories say that it was actually his brother that was buried alive. But either way, someone was buried alive, and I personally think I personally believe the Sultan theory. But it's so tricky because the other part of it is that it's the Sultan's brother, and that he was actually, he like stole a bunch of like treasure and like servants and stuff from his brother the Sultan. So that's why the Sultan himself had someone come and like murder everyone in the house and take back everything. So like I said, two theories. I don't know what I believe at this point. I don't know what to believe. It's so confusing, and like, to me it's just like unnatural. Like, even as an assassin, like, you would have to like drug everyone in the house for them not to scream while you're dismembering their bodies. And if you were to do that the other people would be screaming in chaos and panic. So I don't understand how this happened. It's just like a total mystery, and to me it's kind of like unnatural and maybe even supernatural. But either way, they never found any fucking evidence on what happened in this house. All they knew, there were bodies everywhere in a terrible, terrible mass murder. And not only could they not determine what happened or who did it, but they couldn't even identify most of the bodies that were in this house because they were so dismembered and so torn up that they couldn't identify anyone. So like I said, the theories, the first theory is that it was an Arab sultan that moved into the house, and that he basically had like a brothel going, that he would kidnap women and children and girls and stuff, and he would make them work as sex slaves in this mansion. And then one of the theories is that one of the neighbors or one of the relatives of these girls actually went in there and killed him and murdered everyone. But to me that doesn't really make sense, because why would you murder everyone? Like, if you're just trying to get revenge on one person that like hurt your individual like family member or whatever, why would you kill everyone else? And then not only that, but like there was no story after that of anyone escaping or someone being saved. So does that mean that they killed a relative too? It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And the second theory is that he was not an Arab sultan, but a Turkish sultan, or the brother of the Turkish sultan, and he, like I said, stole everything from his brother, like his you know, his riches, his treasure, his you know, slaves at the time, like anything he took from his brother. And then that's why the sultan himself had assassins come over and just take out everybody in the house. So as far as like the most logical theory goes, I would say that this one is definitely the most logical. I don't necessarily know if I believe this either though, because like, how many fucking assassins would you have to have? Like, how many would you have to have? There was like at least like 30 to 50 people in this house at all times. So to just kill everybody and completely, like, no one heard anything, like nothing, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense. And then how did they get out? How did they not leave a blood trail? How did they get out of there clean without their clothes and everything drenched in blood and you know, body parts, like in the matter of the body? Like, how? It doesn't make any sense. And then there's no witnesses. There's no witnesses seeing these people leave this house all bloody. How do you not see that? How do you not get caught for that? I don't understand it. It doesn't make any fucking sense to me at all. And the third theory is that this was a supernatural or / alien attack or something like that. So, because like I said, there's no evidence. There's no bloody footprints. There's no fingerprints. There's no hairs. There's no DNA. There's nothing. There's nothing. So, and like their body parts were taken out, and it's just like, how do you, ugh. But me personally, I don't know. I don't know what to believe about this. It's one of the weirdest haunted locations I've ever looked into. Mainly because it's not factual. It's all mystery. Like, none of this is documented. So it's like you're kind of just guessing at this point. And it's so weird that there's no evidence. Like, especially, like I said, because the amount of blood, like, that leaves fingerprints. You leave footprints and blood. Like, that's what happens. So I just don't understand. If anything, I would have to say that it's supernatural in some way, shape, or form, only because of that reason, because there's no fucking evidence. After the murders and everything took place, Jean Lepretti actually continued to live in the house until it was foreclosed on in 1878. And by 1940, the Academy of Art took over the mansion because it was actually foreclosed on. But this didn't last long. All of the artists and stuff that were admitted into this mansion and that went to the Academy were actually drafted into the war, which eventually ended up closing the academy and therefore left it a vacant mansion. So the homeless actually took over this mansion and lived in it and resided in it until 1966. And that's when Frank D. Amico and Anthony Viesch, I suck. And they renovated it and actually turned it into an apartment complex. So the apartment complex actually still stands there today, and obviously it's under different ownership. So now my favorite part of the video, the hauntings and ghosts story. So as I just stated, Frank D. Amico's was one of the people that actually bought the residence to renovate it into an apartment complex. And when he did that, he and his wife actually stayed there in 1979. His wife actually had an experience with a paranormal figure. There was a black figure hovering in the corner of the room, and it moved toward her bed, kind of like up the back and up the side of the bed, like to where she was sleeping. And she got so freaked out because it happened so quickly. She was barely able to turn the light on. And then when she did finally get the light on, obviously it disappeared. So she was so freaked out, they never stayed in that place ever again. So that's one of the more famous stories that come from the Sultan's palace. Some people have actually seen the Sultan walking about the property. So because, like I said, he was a very suspicious and unknown man and kind of a mystery in sorts, people didn't really know what he looked like, so they can't definitively say that this is the Sultan. So not only have they seen the Sultan himself, or some say have seen the Sultan himself, but they also see soldiers. There was a lot of dust in that area, so people have actually seen a soldier himself. So some say that he actually stayed in this mansion and that he was one of the victims. So those are really the only actual ghosts that I can really mention or talk about, because that's the only things that I found on this topic. But here are some of the actual paranormal activities that took place other than with Frank D. Amico's wife. A man actually moved into the half basement when it was converted into an apartment complex, and he was doing laundry one day, and the laundry machine and washer was actually in the basement, and he noticed his dog walking down the stairs to get into the basement, which he had done 1,000 times. But his dog was violently pushed down the stairs. He was severely injured, but luckily he did live. But he would never go near like the stairs or the basement, or even past like a certain point in like the living quarters of the living room after that point. And I don't know if you guys know this, but dogs and animals especially are very susceptible to like the paranormal and spirits and stuff. So the fact that he would never go down there is kind of telling in itself. So like I said, today it is actually an apartment complex that does still stand. It is off limits to the public, and you cannot visit there, unfortunately. So this is one that I would probably visit if it was open to the public. Obviously you can't go there. You can go outside and see like the area, I guess, and maybe even the backyard where like the Sultan was buried. You could probably see it from like a certain street viewing. But I would definitely have to make a trip out of this one and go to Louisiana for not only this, but other haunted locations as well. So if you have any suggestions, please leave them down below for anything in Louisiana, because I am going to eventually try to go to these places, but you know, money, time, it's a work in progress. So anyway, so yeah, like I said, please comment down below if there's any other places in Louisiana specifically that I could do research on and maybe do a video on, because I would love to go there and maybe do like a part 2. So that would be really cool. So I know this one wasn't like my normal haunted location stories, but I hope you guys still liked it. So it was kind of more like a mystery rather than like actual factual things, like I said, that happened. But yeah, it's still very interesting, still very crazy, the fact that there's no actual record of any of this stuff. So it's just, like I said, it's kind of weird, but I kind of like it at the same time. It puts a little bit of a different element to it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and you can follow me on Instagram if you would like. It's at Sydney's Poisonous. My jewelry shop is at Perfect Poison Shop, and my YouTube is at Sydney's Poisonous YouTube. And yeah, I will see you guys next week for my 4th episode of Haunted Locations. Bye.